Sorry, I don't mean to ramble, but I'm going to. My kids are driving me crazy. My 9-year-old, she'll be 9 tomorrow. Happy birthday. My 9-year-old, I'm rounding off, is picking up all the bad habits of teenagers. She is insisting for her birthday that she get her ears pierced when we only let her sisters get their ears pierced when they turned 11. So she's pushing that boundary. She is insisting that there are times when she's just in a mood and we have to dance around that, which is something I expect from the teenagers, but not from her. And starting to hear what sounds like, at times, some questionable language coming out of her. You know? Yesterday she was coming up the stairs. I could have sworn I heard her go, shh. I forgot something. What were you about to say? You know, she watches an awful lot of comedy specials on Netflix with her sisters where, you know, it's not the worst stuff in the world, but occasionally you're getting some edgy language and some topics discussed that no 9-year-old should really be aware of. And this is fine. I accept this. This is the job. This is what I basically agreed to when I became a dad. You're going to have teenagers and they're going to be unbearable for 7 years. And then after that, maybe you can have a conversation with them. But for those 7 years, it will be hell. She's 9. I have to deal with her teenage years being longer than 7 years. That's just not fair. That's brutal. I did not sign up for that. That is a violation of the contract because of the disappointment I feel. I am literally going insane. Hello. I don't mean to rant. But you know, it's funny. What I was doing, I would suggest, I would argue, it's not really a rant. What was I doing? Right there. What was I doing? Is that a hand or a stretch?
I forgot the word for it.
It's not a fancy word.
Impromptu speech.
Okay, sure, impromptu. Not necessarily,
Except
and it's coming into focus why it wasn't necessarily impromptu now, is it?
Yeah.
It wasn't just a speech. It was a particular kind of speech. Yes! What's your name again?
Pauline.
Hi, Pauline.
A monologue?
A monologue? Yeah, it was just me talking. I could have made it a call and response thing. My kids suck! Yeah!
It could be like an informative speech.
Informative? Yeah, I'm bitching about my kids. That's informative. You know that they're a pain in the ass. Say hi for me. It's all right. What I was doing, believe it or not, was making an argument. I started out saying something very simple. My kids are driving me crazy. Now! It's not much of an argument. That alone is really just a thought, a complaint, a bitch and moan, if you will. If you were to open up a little font of genius that is modern day Twitter, let's say, you get a deluge of impromptu speeches, shall we say. thoughts, little monologues even. Some of them quite short and simple, 180 characters, whatever. My kids are driving me crazy. Simple, short, get in, get out, just express something, and then let it just sort of sit there. What is the problem with Twitter? Aside from the obvious ones that we don't have time for. When somebody says something on Twitter in a short 180 character punch, what do you think about that? What's your reaction? Yes?
That's just their opinion.
Just their opinion. Yeah. Everybody's got one. It's like, you know, I'm not going there. It's just their opinion. What would they have to do to make it more than just their opinion, where you would say, yeah, it's just their opinion, but you know they've got a point?
Put like a bar graph on it.
What's that?
Put like statistics on it.
Statistics. Ooh, and a bar graph. Very nice. What's your major?
Finance.
Okay, you're a bar graph guy. Very good. I never really got bar graphs. I can't follow them. I'm not a visual person like that. Bar graphs, statistics. Oh, that's sexy stuff. Statistics. As a category of information, what would we call that?
Facts.
Facts. Yeah. If we were to, let's say, pull out a thesaurus and consider facts within a context of making an argument, it would probably be available under the framing of evidence. It's supporting something. It's not just facts. You can find facts anywhere, you know? That is a table. That's a fact. Doesn't really do anything beyond that. In this case, it is supporting a specific statement. My kids are driving me crazy is a statement. If I were to bring up a bar graph, if you will, of my relative irritation levels over the past few years, you would be able to see a steady escalation. That then would be evidence. Thank you. Yes. And if I were to attach, or maybe take a screenshot of this bar graph of my relative anxiety and irritation levels to a tweet that says, my kids are driving me crazy, would you think that I've got a point? Maybe I am going a little crazy?
Yeah, because you did your research.
What's that?
Because you did research.
Because I did some research. Yeah, I'm not just venting like you thought I was initially, probably. You know, just an old guy who's cranky. This is where I go when I want a break from sitting in the park shouting at pigeons. Yeah, I did some homework. You're going to grant me then that much credibility that says, well, you know, at least he did that. But, you know, maybe the person who finds that tweet as they're scrolling along through, you know, all the bitchy Hollywood stuff that's really fun. Maybe that person is like me, basically bar graph illiterate, and doesn't understand how to read a bar graph. And all I'm going to do is say, hey, look, rectangles. That's a pretty color. Does the bar graph mean anything at that point? Does it really make the argument? Now, what would you have to do to seal the deal, to make an argument? Yes.
An explanation.
Oh. explanation. Yes. You need to explain for the dummies out there how the evidence proves the statement. Now, let's take a look at what I did in my little rant when everybody was just rolling their eyes like, oh God, when is he going to shut up? My kids are driving me crazy. Statement. My daughter Charlotte is picking up all the bad habits of teenagers by watching her sisters. This is a fact. Arguably, it's an opinion because it's bad habits, but she is picking up habits from her sisters. This is a fact. I can cite this. At 9 years old, she wants to get her ears pierced even though her sisters were 11 when they got theirs done, semicolon, because I'm fancy. She's mimicking them in the demands for indulgence of moods and rudeness, semicolon, and I'm starting to hear the beginnings of foul language habits picked up from the movies and TV she watches with her sisters. I always expected to have teenagers for a standard amount of time. Each girl would be unendurable for 7 years. What I didn't expect was that the youngest would get a jump on that and leave me facing a full decade of teenager behavior. This is driving me crazy. This is an argument. I started with this statement, which is now no longer underlined. It's up here somewhere. And then I worked through some evidence. And then again, the evidence is just data. And it may or may not be clear what relation it bears to the original statement. And the funny thing is, with evidence, is that no two people are ever going to look at it the same way. You know? Those of you who are economics majors know that you can look at the exact same set of data as a half dozen other people, and you will get a half dozen wildly divergent interpretations of that data. So, in order to make an argument, in order to make a case, to convince people that your original statement is worth anything more than a brain fart / tweet, you need to not only show that you have collected some evidence, not just, signal that, hey, I can Google. You need to explain how the evidence proved the statement. You need to lay out your argument in a very clear manner, as if the person you are explaining this to is a total moron. You cannot talk down to someone in this instance. You need to make it clear. This is why I go through the explanation, trying to lay out exactly why all of these facts have some bearing on my original statement. What is it about these facts that is making me crazy? It's not just that these things are happening, it's that I expected one thing and in reality smacked me in the ass with something else. It's not just that these things are happening, I expected these things to happen. It's that what the average person seeing these facts could just dispel as, well, yeah, you should have known this. I'm saying, no, it's more than that. Understand how I am reading this set of data. This information is not what you think on its surface. Let me explain to you so that you understand it. This is a paragraph. Statement, evidence, explanation. S-E-E. Every paragraph you write in an essay should follow this format. I don't know about you, but when I first started writing college papers, I didn't know what the hell to put. I literally remember thinking, what's a paper? And I had no idea. And the basic task of writing a paper for me was sitting down and writing until I stopped coming up with stuff to say. And I'd check my word count, which was handy in the early days before you had software. Typewriters were great. You can sort of hide these things a little bit more. Or just claim, well, I thought it looked like 4,000 words. I couldn't count that high, but you know. But I had no idea. And the thing is, the hardest thing you can do in this world is something when you don't know how to do it. If you have some idea, no matter how difficult the task, you can get through it. You might not be expert. You might not be particularly original or inspiring in this, but you can execute it. And it helps to have step-by-step understandings of where you're going in the process. Because when I would sit down to write, I would write, and I would write, and I would write. And a paragraph was as much as I could write before I got hungry and went for a snack. And then I would come back, I forget what I was saying, hit return, tab, new paragraph. I guess I was done saying what I needed to say. I didn't understand what a paragraph was supposed to be. I didn't understand what the beginning, middle, and end of a paragraph was. I didn't understand how it was supposed to function, what it was supposed to do. And so, I don't know, it's like trying to rebuild a car engine when you have no idea what each component actually does. You just throw them all under the hood, close the hood, and say, well, I guess that's done. Where are the keys? Understanding the individual functions helps enormously. I just dribbled on myself. Good for wearing charcoal colors. When you are writing a paragraph, start out with a simple, clear statement. What do you have to say? It is almost always, in this case, going to be an opinion. In this case, in this class, it will be an opinion about writing, about a piece of literature. And maybe you want to say something like, let's say, what did we talk about last week? In Genesis, there is a persistent theme of tribal divisions laid out in the work. Period. Simple, arguable, it's an opinion. There are no commas in there to make it complicated. Don't get fancy. And then you can go in and find some evidence. Evidence that we find in literature classes tend to be in the literature. Find it there. You go back and evidence in a literature class tends to come in quotations. Yes, very good, thank you. Quotation form. Show me some quotations. It proves to me that you read this stuff at least a little bit. Or at least you can find it in the book. And then say, yeah, there. At certain points in Genesis, in book 1, in the moment of creation, the act of creation is a function of division. You see God dividing light from day, water from land, animals from people, blah, 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 blah. This act of division continues throughout. I laid down some evidence. I would quote directly from the text. I don't know it by heart, and I'm not going to look it up, but I would do something like that, show some quotation. Again, showing your work impresses people. And then you go back and you have to explain, because it's not done yet. You don't just toss up the evidence and say, well, that proves my point. Mic drop. Pa! Everybody's going to have a different opinion. You know, it's not like the Bible is an open and shut case for anyone. Been arguing about it for thousands of years. So, you make your argument. You make your case. You come back and you say, this shows that. This is a phrase I want you to remember. This shows that, ... Plug it in. Every time you put in a quotation or a piece of evidence in an argument, follow it with that phrase. This shows that. It's a gear shift. It's clumsy at first, and you might feel silly when I'm asking everybody to do it, but it gets you from one place to another. It gets you from evidence into explanation. And then all you have to do is basically interpret what you just tossed up there. This shows that the early authors of the Bible were very concerned with tribal divisions. They saw distinction as good. Every time God did something that divided one thing from another, it was announced that it was good. This shows that division in that ancient nomadic tribal society was valued, was prioritized, was heralded as God's will. And so, the Bible in Genesis validates tribal distinction. It's an argument. Might be total BS, I don't know. But because I show my work, because I lay out my explanation, because I treat you to at least a logical discourse, is the fancy English teacher word for it, a logical discourse on my opinion, you at least have to grant me some validity. You might totally disagree. Many people do. That's fine, I can take a punch. But because I go through the hoops, because I show my work, it's not BS at that point. I'm showing you that I'm making an effort. I'm supporting what I'm saying. It's not just a tweet, a brain fart, a thought off the top of my head. I have taken the time to couch what I'm saying in an organized, logical manner, and therefore, it's deserving of at least that respect. And here's where it becomes of concern for you. In everything you do in your professional life, you are making two arguments. One, that you're good at the details of your job and you have a command over your discipline. You can do the work. That's great. That's what you want. Every boss wants people who can do their work. But the other point you're trying to prove in that is that you are the kind of person who can do that work. You want to be the person who demonstrates logic on a regular basis, who demonstrates professionalism on a regular basis, who appeals to a certain professional norm that everybody's going to be looking for. You want to be that person. Just for fun, this format that I'm showing you, statement, evidence, explanation, we will be hearing about this, works on the grander model as well, the actual essay. Statement, evidence, explanation. 1, 2, 3. 3 is a magic number. Google the rule of 3s. It appeals to human nature for some reason, or at least smarter people than I do say so. And I believe them because they come to me with bar graphs. The rule of 3s, it's always a priest, a minister, and a rabbi who walk into a bar. It's never just 2 of them. They travel in 3s. Because the function of a joke is you set a norm with the first example, the second one reinforces that norm and forms a pattern and an expectation, and then the third subverts it. That's how comedy works. You know, listen to a joke and you get it. If you start thinking about that too much, the joke becomes no fun. So don't listen too hard. But the rule of 3s works. Arguments work in 3s. Statement, evidence, explanation. That's how a paragraph works. An essay is the same thing. Statement, evidence, explanation. According to every high school English teacher ever, how many parts are there in a standard academic essay? 6? 5? 3. What are they?
The introduction, the body, and the
Conclusion. Yeah. 3. But you're not wrong either. How many body paragraphs do you usually use? 3. There's that number again. It must be a conspiracy. We'll get to numerology later. That's a whole thing that comes out of the Middle Ages. 3. It's a magical number. It appeals. It's logical. The evidence is your body paragraph, and it comes in usually 3 different paragraphs. The statement is simple. And honestly, I would argue that at this stage, a good essay introduction has 3 sentences. Same could be said about the conclusion. The explanation is essentially a conclusion. The explanation is when you get up and you just say, all this shows that my original statement stands. Break that up into 3 sentences and you're fine. This is an essay form of the exact same rant I made before, just broken out a little bit. My kids are driving me crazy. Ha! That sounds familiar. Why reinvent the wheel? I'm using the same thing. My daughter Charlotte is picking up all the bad habits of teenagers by watching her sisters. This is making my life a living hell. A little stronger, a little bit more profane, but the more I write about it, the more irritated I get. That's the way kids are. She is asserting rights not entitled to a 9-year-old. And here I'm talking about ears pierced, which I talked about in the last paragraph, but now I'm generalizing it. I'm taking that one little chunk of evidence, and instead of stacking all three inside of a single paragraph, I'm going to break each one out and develop it individually. The way to do that is to take the specific example and just try and generalize it a little bit. Abstract it. Objectify it. She is asserting rights not entitled to a 9-year-old. That is the core problem. And then, because I didn't go straight to ears pierced in the first sentence, then I've got that in reserve and I can pull that out for my second sentence. Breaking these things up into individual sentences is always a challenge. You never quite know what the hell to say, but often it's just about knowing when to say what you already had to say. Don't spend it all in the first round. That first sentence, know that you just go objective. Know that you just go a little bit more general. She is asserting rights not entitled to a 9-year-old. She expects to get her ears pierced this week. Her sisters got their ears pierced when they were 11. This shows that her expectations are way more extravagant than her sisters. She is demanding treatment beyond the precedent we set with the older two. This is part of a pattern of behavior beyond her years. These are all basically saying the same thing. I'm not going crazy here. but I'm trying to drive my point. And everything is about proving a single point one at a time. And every time I get to the end of a paragraph, every time I get to the end of an essay, I go back and I repeat what I started to say at the beginning of that paragraph or essay. Because the use of the word evidence is, and even a statement, is strategic. What context is that word usually used in? Evidence, law, court stuff. Anyone who has ever seen an episode of Law and Order or any of those shows? Law and Order's been on for like 75 years at this point. Somebody must have seen it somewhere. It plays on a wheel on like all those Turner cable stations. At the beginning of a trial, they always have the attorney stand up and say, "My client is innocent." And that is an opening statement. They say it for longer than that because they're making $700 an hour. So, you know, they got to stretch it out. But that is an opening statement in a court case. And then everything that follows is them laying out evidence. My client is innocent. I have here a plane ticket for a flight to Oregon on the day of the murder. And that flight took off 2 hours after the murder is alleged to have been committed. I have here an Uber receipt for my client taking a car from the city out to the airport on that day. Clearly, he could not have made it in time. Clearly, there was not time to kill someone and make it to the airport because everybody knows the Van Wyck is a disaster. Everybody knows this, but I'm going to bring you traffic reports and weather reports from that day and bury you in all of this paperwork so that you've got to admit, wow, that's impressive. That's a lot of evidence. That's a lot of data, a lot of information. Maybe I can find some bar graphs to put in there too and make it really impressive. Laying it all down. And then at the end of that court case, they come up with a closing. Yes. And they tell you, all this shows that my client is innocent. They don't leave any doubt about their main point. They're not up there to make a different point. All this shows that my client is always late for the airport. No, they're not going to change the focus. They want one thought to be in that jury's mind because they know that as good communicators, people can only be expected to embrace so many thoughts at one time. So you want it to be the one that counts. The one that will continue to get you $700 an hour. Law, what a scam. But it's no different than understanding this. Once you've got this, everything else is just paperwork. Make the case. Make it logical. Make it functional. It's very difficult to do anything without understanding each individual step. You never know where you are in the process. You never know when you're done. The reason I asked for a 750-word paper isn't so that you can spend that much less time writing. It's so that you can see what each sentence is supposed to do. And if you have a sentence in there that's doing nothing, that's coming out. I got to tell you. I will tell you to strike it. More is interference. More is difficult to see how it works. I want your essays stripped down. I want your essays bare bones, because then I can see what you're saying, and more importantly, so can you. You're not just generating language to, cover up, little smoke and mirrors here. Oh, look, here's a catchy phrase I can toss in there, aren't I cute? Please don't acknowledge that the phrase serves no purpose and is completely superfluous to your argument. I want you to do everything that you do for this class to be deliberate. And this is how we do that. As we get closer to term papers, I will be talking about this much more frequently. We will be going over this in excruciating detail. I will post this essay and the paragraph that it stems from on Blackboard. You can see how that functions. I think we can all agree that nobody is going to copy me ranting about my kids for their papers, but using it as a model for, okay, what does this sentence do? What does that sentence do? Isn't a bad thing. Over time, as you get a little bit more confident with this, you can feel comfortable getting a little bit more expressive. 750 is a minimum, not a maximum. If you want to write me 30 pages, go for it. Don't commit to that up front. We'll just see how it turns out. But start on this level. Start very basic. And we can develop as you get comfortable. Even if you are comfortable, I want to go back to the fundamentals. Show me that. My analogy for this, honestly, learning to dance. When I got engaged, I was told that I had to do a first dance as husband and wife in front of, I think we clocked in at more than 200 people watching. And, that's a sobering moment for anybody, big clumsy guys especially. Nobody tall should dance. It's just not a good look. But I had to go take lessons, and I show up at this nice studio, and this very nice professional dance teacher was great and very patient with me, and I just crushed her feet. But you show up, and on this very nice hardwood floor, there are these little feet painted, and they're treating you like a 2-year-old that says, okay, now put your foot there. Now put your other foot, wait for it, there. And then you see those numbers? Those numbers are in an order. Follow that order. And that's what you're doing. And you just follow those steps. And I have no ego. I knew I wasn't going to be looking particularly good out there. I just wanted to execute the basics. So I did this. And that got me where I needed to be. I was never going to be particularly good. But I understood that if I kept practicing, and I knew I wouldn't, if I kept practicing, maybe I would get better. And maybe I would be able to start doing it without counting in my head and wondering what the hell I was doing and thinking, okay, now this foot, 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 now this foot. Pretty soon I would get out of my head and I'd be able to start to hear the music and follow the beat more than just my own head. And then I'd be able to think my way through it in a less literal way until I wasn't thinking about it at all. And I was just following along. And then pretty soon it's no longer just about the steps because my feet are sort of going in those rough directions. And then pretty soon you can start really getting funky and really hearing the music. And pretty soon, my little tush is swinging all over the place, and I'm having a great time out there. I knew all this was possible. I wasn't going to do it in front of 200 people, but it was possible because I had mastered the steps. And after that, you can start to get fancy. We're not there yet. Maybe you guys are publishing in the New Yorker on your free time right now. I don't know. I'm going to assume, statistically speaking, that's unlikely. But for now, I want you to stay very, very basic. You can't insult my intelligence. Talk down to me. Lay it out like I am 5 years old. Okay? Okay. This is cold by now. And that's just awful.